I do see that we've got some friends in the audience. I can't see everybody, but I can see the top of Jeff Lynn's head there. So, hey, Jeff.
What's up?
I think just judging from who's in the audience and who was also billed to be speaking with you today, a lot of you have already heard many of the broad contours about the governor's plan, your plan really for education workforce transformation, the 2020 plan. So what I'd like to do today is give you some updates on where we are in regard to implementation. I think it's important that at this point in the show, now that we're 2 years in and the governor's been in office since the April of 2017, and in that time, a lot has happened. Her first major initiative, Strong Start, Strong Finish, working with a lot of you in that room, put together a plan that for the first time recognized that we have to have a vision that breaks down what the governor and a lot of folks call silos, where before we had a lot of different pockets of excellence and all of our agencies are doing good work. But what we needed to do is have a governor like Governor Ivey, who recognizes the need for a strong economy, and the way to get there is by connecting the economy to our education system. And so first, before we get in that, we just want to thank you on behalf of the governor for all that you have done to embrace this vision, to help create this vision. And you know, as we say, we've kind of been writing this hymnal together, and now we're about to start singing out of that hymnal together. So that's more of where we're going to get at today is what that's going to look like now that we've got everything down on paper and we're moving forward. But it's important to just step back and recall that having a unified P to 20W vision, and what I mean by that is P being or focus on early childhood education, recognizing that those first 8 years of life are so formative, and so much of the things that those that are in K-12 education in the room know that we have to do a lot of making up for deficits that students walk into in the classroom on their first day of school with. And so if we can do a strong job, and not just our first class pre-K program, that's the top pre-K program, getting tongue-tied here, pre-K program in the country, but we also have a very strong standard of quality of what we know needs to be true for all kids in regard to pre-K education. So recognizing that 95% of a child's brain capacity is developed, not 95% of what you're going to know, but 95% of your brain's capacity is developed by age 5. We've got to have a strong strategy to make sure that our parents or our child's are their child's best first teacher. And so people like Secretary Ross with the Department of Early Childhood Education, Commissioner Buckner and DHR and others are working with community-based organizations in East Alabama, places all across the state, to empower families to make up for a lot of these factors, whether we, fancy word like health comorbidities, which just means that if a kid's going to school hungry, if they've got undiagnosed or untreated asthma or other things that are keeping their mind off of learning, then we're not going to have the kind of outcomes that we know we need to have. So the first focus of the governor's education and combined workforce strategy is making sure we're doing the right thing by our youngest learners. And that really starts from birth, and even before that, and working with our mothers to make sure that we're bringing healthy children into the world. And so we're very proud of that component, and something else we're proud of is the fact that many of our folks that are traditionally in the workforce field, the idea of early childhood education might not be the first thing that comes to mind when we're talking about workforce development or economic development. And I think why the governor's focus and the work that we've done in first class pre-K has taken off so well is because we have been able to make the connection between why it's important, not only just like if you've got somebody that has been sent somewhere away from their family. They want to make sure their family is taken care of. Well, that's the same for everybody that goes to work every day. I mean, we want to make sure that our families and our children are in a place to where they're learning, being taken care of. And so that's just a common sense, intuitive thing. But beyond that, it's also an economic development strategy, because we know, it's based on what I just said before, that if we are hitting home runs with our young people in those first 8 years, the return on investment there is higher than at any other point. And we know just anecdotally that we're going to be saving money in other areas and on things that we don't want to have to spend money on if we're doing the right thing there. Now, also, Governor recognized that we have an economy that is, it's been transitioning. We've been saying now for 20 years or longer that we're seeing a transition into more middle skill jobs, into jobs that require more than a high school diploma but less than a 4-year degree, that we are going to have to start working with employers more closely to identify the competencies, not just based on a seat-based or a time-based approach to learning, but identifying the underlying competencies that somebody needs to know to be proficient on the job and within the workforce, not just in a particular occupation, but within a whole industry cluster. So that's really where the governor's focus on computer science for Alabama, or the second phase of Strong Start, came from, is because computer science is we're not just focused on computer science. Computer science is kind of just the rallying point, or the way that we're focusing attention around this. But there's over 4,000 jobs in computing or IT right now that we have, that we're trying to fill today in the state, and many of y'all that are employers may have some of those openings because of a skills gap. And so we know that we have to close that skills gap, and it's not just in computer science, but it's in areas such as healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and we're doing a lot of good work to close that gap. But what we're recognizing is that we have to make sure that for our young people, if they want to go into one of these middle skills pathways, that they have a school day, that they have a program that is structured to allow them to get credit for their career tech course and their academic course at the same time. So that's where our focus on computer science for Alabama. There was a bill passed this year called HB 216, or the Computer Science for Alabama Act, that for the first time is going to allow a young person to get a math or a science credit for completing a computer science course. So you can think, if you're going to complete an apprenticeship in high school and you're going to do a lot of these advanced courses, you still got to get your academic credits, of course. But we also want kids to have a life, right? I mean, maybe they want to be in the band, or they want to be on the football team. And I was a teacher for a brief time, just long enough to realize I probably needed to find a different line of work, but long enough to realize the challenges that our teachers face. And one of those is just trying to get all of these things done that you have to get done in a constricted amount of time, on top of different paperwork burden that we have. So we're going to continue to explore opportunities, not just in computer science, but in other areas, particularly for students. And many of my students, I did not teach welding. I was a history teacher, but I often would go and just spend some time in the welding shop in my planning period. And I noticed that some of my students that had some of the most severe exceptionalities in the academic classroom were some of my best, were some of the best students out there in the welding shop. And often some of the same skills that they were struggling to catch on to in the traditional classroom, they were picking up because they were kinesthetic learners, and they learn by doing things in an applied way. And so not everybody's like that. I mean, me personally, I'm kind of more of a pinhead. I got to sit there and listen to the lecture and take notes and go back and look at the PowerPoint, and that's fine. That's my learning style. But we've got to make sure that we are reflective of all of the different learning styles out there. And so for those students that are really learning from an applied perspective, we're going to expand opportunities for them to be able to get their academic credit, because they really are, if they're learning the same standards, then we should consider that. So, but computer science and HB 216 is the first step in regard to what will hopefully be a long-term endeavor to, in a better way, connect folks' learning styles to the economy and to education, because we're not only helping folks learn the way that best suits them, but we're also training them to fit a high demand, high wage, high skilled job that's going to help them become a self-sufficient member of our society. And so that kind of helps me transition into the third phase of Strong Start, which really is about human capital development. And what do I mean by human capital development? But we all say it, and it's kind of a cliche, and it's all, we all mean it. But I think what we have to do is show how we mean the statement that our people, our workforce, our human capital, that's our best asset. And so we all know that to be true, but how do we align a public policy dynamic that makes that to be true, so that folks are able to move through a career pathway that allows them to be the masters of their own destiny? So what the governor, kind of thinking about human capital development, what we realized is we've got to make sure that work is paying for everybody across the state of Alabama, whether it's in a rural area, whether it's in a very inner city area, anywhere in the state of Alabama. We want to make sure that paid employment is the opportunity that pays the most for somebody in every area. And so one of the biggest challenges that we face is something that y'all may have heard referred to as the benefit cliff. In other words, when somebody determines to transition into paid employment, maybe they were unemployed for a time, or had always had weak attachment to the labor force, for whatever reason, they had a barrier to education, workforce training. Often when somebody goes into paid employment, they may lose one or more benefits that was helping maintain a already very tenuous placehold on life. And so if you go to work and you lose your child care, or you lose some kind of other nutrition assistance you may have, that makes it very tough for folks who we really need to go and become trained and skilled to fill these open positions and to really take control over their own destiny. It makes it difficult for that individual to choose paid employment, to make that to be in their own best interest. And so Secretary Washington, who I know is in the audience too, want to just shout him out and say that he has done an exceptional job over the past 2 years, and certainly doesn't need me to say that, but I want to say it anyway, in increasing the labor force participation rate. And so what that means is that's the number of individuals in the labor force between 16 and 64 who are actively employed or who are looking for a job. And so if you look at across the other states in the Southeast, we're now at 58%. Just 2 years ago, we were down in the 56, and even before that, even lower. And so we've had the highest growth, and that's because we have a very intentional and targeted strategy from everybody, with him leading it through our one-stop centers and partnering with our community college system, with our DHR partners, to provide a braided funding strategy so that we have all 100 plus of our federal and state funded workforce programs working to help individuals overcome their barriers to entering education workforce training. And a lot of it is that benefit cliff that I described, where there's just some showstopper to where somebody goes to work for paid employment that keeps them from being able to remain there. And so hats off to Secretary Washington and the Department of Labor, but we've got everybody here, and starting with me, we've got to do even more to support Secretary Washington, to support Chancellor Baker, to support Superintendent Mackey and Commissioner Buckner and others that are involved in our human capital strategy, to make sure that we are braiding each of those programs and empowering the community-based organizations that are right there in East Alabama, that are in all 7 of our workforce regions, to be doing the main blocking and tackling on a daily basis. And so what we are aiming to do here in Montgomery is to provide the backup and the support and provide the resources, but we want this plan to be driven by you. And so what we've seen for a long time is that somebody new will come around and the pendulum swings the other way, and that doesn't last very long. And so, when that fizzles out, when you get a change in leadership or direction, and then all these plans gather dust and they're never implemented. And part of that problem is because in the past, about 90% of these plans get baked in the basement of the Capitol somewhere down where somewhere like my office, and only spends about 10% of the time out with the people of the state of Alabama. So I think you have seen, and I think, we want to do more than me just saying it, but hopefully you've seen in these comprehensive local needs assessment meetings that we've had recently. We're going to have a second series of 7 meetings about the upcoming Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act and Perkins 5 meeting. But we want to reverse that dynamic to where 90% of the plan is spending the time out in the public, and only about 10% of the time is in the Capitol. And so that part is the most important, that we are ensuring that this plan has got the total buy-in of each of you, that it is informed and is actually your plan, because your words, your hopes and the vision for your community are reflected in that plan. And not only that's how we're going to get the buy-in, but that's how we're going to take Perkins and WIOA in Alabama and make it more than a compliance document. It's going to be more of a vision statement for our state. And so that is all, it kind of imminent, the wellspring of that is the attainment goal that the governor has set along with y'all, to add 500,000 more skilled workers to our workforce by 2025. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to help Secretary Washington continue to increase that labor force participation rate. That's the only way we're going to be able to help each of our community colleges increase the number of folks that we have in our career pathway program and skilled training programs. And it's about equity too, because the point of Perkins, the point of WIOA, is to close gaps among subgroups that we know have been disadvantaged for either economic reasons or historical reasons or geographic reasons. And so our job is to identify all those barriers. And we've identified 20 plus special populations by aligning those that have been outlined in WIOA and Perkins, coming up with a consensus set of special populations, and then making it to where the buck doesn't just stop with the governor or with any one agency, but it stops with everywhere, because we've broken that 500,000 goal down to where each region has a goal, each county has a goal of the 500,000. Each of those special populations, whether that's somebody that is a veteran, somebody that may be that has a disability, somebody that may be justice involved, that is returning to the civilian society after having been incarcerated. We know the individuals and the challenges and opportunities that the folks that we're serving in the community come to the table with. And so what we need to learn more and do more intentionally is put together all of the dollars and all the strategies that we have to serve those folks. So y'all know those people. The people in Montgomery know where the funding and know where the programmatic alignment is. And so I think that is a fair partnership. That is a good strategy for us to listen to y'all. You tell us who are the people, where are they at, what are their particular barriers, and then we're going to help eliminate the red tape and the roadblocks that has been inhibiting our ability to get those dollars in the hands of the folks and in the hands of the organizations that are serving those folks. So if we think of that together, thinking that we have an intentional strategy starting with early childhood education, goes on to make sure that we are doing a better job of connecting young folks with making up for their experiential deficits, so they're able to explore the different career pathways that are available to them. It's hard to know what you want to be if you've never seen what there is to be. And so we're connecting folks, to skills like computer science and middle skill jobs, and then through a human capital development strategy that says we're taking the luck and the guesswork and chance out of being an Alabamian. No matter what your zip code is, no matter where you happen to be born, you need to have the same opportunity to be a self-sufficient individual in our society. So if you thought of this entire operation as an equation, and the outcome of the equation is self-sufficient individuals, then what we're talking about, the inputs, so if we're talking about A plus B equals C, and C are those self-sufficient individuals, then we know we've got to have economic mobility, and that's where we get in with our career pathways and our structured approach to workforce development. And we also have to have social capital, the resurgence of our communities, and the idea that for too long, folks in Montgomery and certainly folks in Washington, D.C. have been taking your tax dollars and then saying, we're going to give you this money back, but we're going to tell you how you're going to spend it. Well, we think that a better approach would be to let you spend your money, your tax dollars on the way that is best to serve the folks in your community. So that at its most simple level is what this plan is about. And I think just to share with you briefly a couple of highlights on the work that's kind of moving down the court to implement some of these things. So we are working to implement Act 2019-506. It was passed into law, signed by the governor in June, was carried by Senator Orr and Representative Alan Baker. And this creates a new state office of apprenticeship and we have a new apprenticeship director, Josh Laney. We're working to establish a new form of apprenticeship, industry recognized apprenticeship and community college system. And Jeff Flynn received a large grant from the U.S. Department of Labor to help stand up a preeminent type of IRAP through the FAME program, working with Mazda Toyota and also working with NAM, the National Association of Manufacturers, to develop a more nimble type of apprenticeship. And so that's going to be great because also the Act has established a community college system as the designated intermediary. So working very closely with the Department of Commerce and the Office of Apprenticeship, the community college system is going to, together, they're going to make Alabama really the golden child in regard to apprenticeship nationally. And we're going to be setting the bar in regard to embracing the quality of traditional registered apprenticeships that have been the gold standard since 1937 with the National Apprenticeship Act and have bipartisan support all across the country, and also the flexibility of this new industry recognized apprenticeship model that is going to help meet the needs of many of our growing industries, particularly in healthcare, IT, and advanced manufacturing. Also in that same bill, or same law rather, the Alabama Committee on Credentialing and Career Pathways was established. Right now, it's kind of like the Wild West with non-degree credential recognition. We've got over 4,000 different providers of non-degree credentials. So what we're doing is working to create stackable credential sequences. And what I mean by non-degree credentials is if an industry group or trade association issues a credential that recognizes the mastery of a particular competency that they demand on the workplace. So we're working to not only figure out what are the sequences of those credentials that are aligned to each occupation, but then also to align those with traditional academic programs, work-based learning experiences like apprenticeship, to sort of create the DNA for a career pathway, to almost create an interstate system for career pathways to where we've got multiple occupations and where people can advance through. And just like an interstate, I mean, you may get off at one exit and that's where you're good with being at, or you stay on the interstate and all the way down to the end, and there is a terminal point, and that may transition into another career pathway. So all of these stackable credential sequences are aligned to employer-demanded competencies and are also based on allowing somebody to have transferability and portability within a particular firm, within a career pathway, so they could advance, for example, if you're in the nursing field, from a CNA to an LPN to a registered nurse. And that also shows how these academic and technical skills are not mutually exclusive. They're complementary. You cannot, there's no way that somebody could move through a new era CTE pathway without not having mastered the academic and technical skills. So to pull all of this off, you have to be data driven. So we're also standing up the Alabama Terminal on Linking and Analyzing Statistics, or we call it ATLAS for short, Atlas on Career Pathways. It's going to be a robust data system, interagency data sharing system. It's going to allow us to be able to meaningfully make some informed decisions and make some targeted adjustments to make sure we're aligning the academic and workforce programs. So I know I shared a lot with you there. We've got certainly have documents that has more information that you can dive into further. And just judging from the folks you've got in the audience, I think there's as many folks there that could answer any questions you have on this there. But I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to join you today, and I hope I have not gone on longer than I was supposed to. So thank you.
Thank you, Nick.